We have a manager named Tucci. She's the manager of customer loyalty plans, and she asks you to compare the number of years a customer has been with BANATEL between customers who did and who did not churn. Her starting position is that all customers have the same tenure with the company. Okay, so it doesn't really matter if you churned or not, your tenure is the same. So we need a couple of bits of information here. We're going to need to know the average for people who did not churn, the average for people who did churn, the standard deviation of people. So let's just do group 1 is did not churn. So we need to know their mean, standard deviation, and count. Group 2 did churn. We'll need to know their mean, standard deviation, and count. Okay, mean, standard deviation, count. So we have this data. Here is tenure right here. And here's the exited, so it's churn. How do you separate this out? If you just do this, you can get the overall average, but that's not what we want. We need it broken down by group. The easiest way to do this is to do a pivot table, right? Easiest way. We'll go to Insert, Tables, Pivot Table. It's going to ask what data to include. We want to include all of this data. So we want to separate things out by whether or not they exited. So that is our rows. 0 means you did not exit, 1 means you did exit. Now we want to compare this information, tenure. We don't want the count of tenure, that's not helpful. We want to know the average of tenure. So now this is the average of tenure if you did not churn, that's the average of tenure if you did churn. That gets us the mean. So the mean for did not churn is 5.0332. The mean for people who did churn is 4.932. So it's slightly less, right? But we don't know if that matters or not. That's what we're going to find out. So we also need to know the standard deviation. Click on the I, change this to standard deviation. And finally, we need to know the count. You can see there are many more people who did not churn than who did. Right, so this information, standard deviation is 2.8806, and the count is 7,963. For group 2, it's 2.936, and the count is 2,037. Okay, that is all the raw information we need. Now we're going to plug it into this formula. We'll start by doing the numerator, so the things on the top. That's the point difference. So that's the average for did not churn minus the average for did churn. That's the point difference between the two. Now the denominator are the things below the line. Okay, I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I'll do it for group 1, group 2. So sigma squared is the standard deviation squared. That is also called the variance. So we will take standard deviation. If you do shift 6, that gives you a little caret. That can do squared. And I will divide it by the count of that group. For group 2, take their standard deviation, little caret, so So it's squared divided by the number in that group. All right, now my last step is to pull them together. So I will do the square root, SQRT, square root, of this group 1 plus this group 2, and that's my denominator. So that means my z is equal to my numerator divided by my denominator. And that's the answer. Okay. So for a test like this, the critical value of z is 1.96. Is this bigger than 1.96? It is not. So we will fail to reject the null hypothesis that they're different. We'll say there's not evidence to suggest that there is a difference in tenure between the two groups.